You paid my note. 2 years. In secret. Holloway told me.
He shouldn't have. He shouldn't have had to.
Why, Silas? Don't tell me a crop's a crop.
Your husband, Michael, Tennessee, a private came through the fire for me. He saved my whole life. I couldn't save one farm with it.
You've got it wrong, Silas. Michael crawled through fire because you were worth crawling for.
Edna,
You've been closing an account he never opened. I won't be your bookkeeping, Silas. Not a debt you owe a ghost. If I became a woman to you, say it plain.
There are men who come home from a war and simply pick up where they left off, as if the years of powder and blood were only a long winter they'd waited out. Silas Kern was not quite that kind of man. He came back to Colorado with a hitch in his walk and a hand that would never open all the way again, the fingers curled like the roots of something that had tried to grow through rock. He came back to a cabin gone gray and a spread gone quiet, and he told himself that quiet was what he wanted. He was good at telling himself things, what he never told anyone, not the banker, not the preacher, not the widow it would have saved a season of shame, was the one thing the whole town would never have forgiven a man like him for doing. He kept it in a tin box under a loose board, and he kept it the way he kept everything that mattered, alone and in the dark, and never spoken aloud. The spring thaw came late to the high country that year, in 1879. For weeks, the snow had held the valley in a white fist, and then one gray morning, the fist opened. Water ran off the eaves and swelled the creek until it talked to itself all night long, and Edna Rourke stood at the edge of her field, with her boots sinking in the muck, and counted her rows the way another woman might have counted her blessings, because she had fewer blessings than rows. She was 35 years old. She had buried a husband 2 winters back, a good man and a foolish one, dead of a fever that ended as a mound of stones on the hill, and she had kept his farm alive with her own 2 hands ever since. The town did not admire her for it. The town thought a woman alone on a piece of land was a problem waiting to become a scandal, and watched her the way you watch a candle left too near a curtain. Edna knew what they thought. She wore it the way she wore her mended shawl, plainly, without apology, and warmer than it looked. She was a full-figured woman with flour-dusted forearms, and if the town found her too much of one thing and not enough of another, she had long since stopped asking the town's opinion. She had a field to plant. That was answer enough. The seed potatoes had sprouted in the cellar over the winter, pale eyes reaching in the dark for a sun they couldn't find, and she carried them up in her apron and knelt in the cold mud and pressed them in one by one. Her hands were cracked from lie and weather, and she did not think about her hands. She thought about September. She thought about a harvest heavy enough to sell, and the way those coins would sit in the banker's palm and finally stop the slow bleed of what she owed. She did not yet know how little time September would allow her. The notice came on a Tuesday, nailed to her gatepost by a man who would not meet her eyes. It was printed in the hard black letters the law used when it meant to take something, and it said the note on her land had come due in full, and the property would be offered at public seizure sale within the month, unless the entire balance was satisfied. There was a figure written on it. Edna looked at it and felt the ground tilt under her, though her boots never moved. She walked into the bank the next morning with her chin level and asked to see the ledger. The banker was a soft man named Prudence Holloway, and he was not unkind, exactly. He was only weak in the particular way that lets a man do a cruel thing while feeling sorry about it. "There's been an arrangement," he said, turning the ledger so she could see. "Your payments, they've been made regular, every quarter, on the day. But that arrangement's come to its end, Mrs. Rourke. The note itself was always coming due. I'm afraid it's due now." "What arrangement?" Edna said. Holloway's eyes slid to the side. "I'm not at liberty. I've made every payment myself," she said. "In this room, into your hand." "You've made a payment," he agreed, gently, as if correcting a child. "Each quarter you brought what you could, and each quarter the balance was met, completed, by other means." He closed the ledger. I've said more than I should. The sale stands, unless the full sum is paid. I am sorry, Edna. Truly, I am. She stood there a long moment. Truly, he said. People were always truly sorry. It cost nothing and did even less. And Edna Rourke understood two things at once. The first was that she was going to lose her farm. The second was that for 2 years, someone she did not know had been quietly keeping her from losing it, and had now, for reasons she could not fathom, stopped. She did not know whether to feel grateful or robbed. She felt both, and the two ground against each other like millstones with no grain between them. Silas Kern's land ran along the north border of the Rourke farm, and the two properties shared a creek, warily, each drawing what they needed and no more. Silas had watched the widow work that ground for 2 years, the way you watch weather. He knew the particular stubborn set of her shoulders when a job was too big for one person, and she meant to do it anyway. He knew more than that, though he'd have cut out his own tongue before he said it. He was mending his own fence the afternoon she came up the creek path, and he saw her before she saw him. The notice in her fist, and a look on her face he recognized from the war. The look of someone doing the arithmetic of a thing that could not be added up any way that saved them. "You're Kern," she said, when she reached him. It wasn't a question. "I am. You share my water. I share the creek," he said carefully. "The water shares itself." She held up the notice. "Then you'll have heard. They mean to sell my ground. Whoever buys it, buys their half of the creek with it. I came to tell you myself, before the flyers go up." She said it the way you'd report a death. "I didn't want you hearing it in town like gossip." Silas set down his hammer. His scarred hand hung at his side, the fingers curled, and he did not offer it to shake. "Sit," he said, nodding at the porch step. "You've walked a long way to give a man bad news. It's not bad news for you," she said. "New neighbors. Might be an improvement. Sit anyway." She sat. He brought her water in a dented tin cup, and she drank it without thanking him, which he found he respected. Thanks were for people who expected the world to be kind. This woman expected nothing, and there was a hard, clean dignity in it that struck him somewhere he'd thought long dead. They sat in the thawing afternoon and did not speak much. That was the beginning of it, though neither of them would have called it a beginning. He asked how much the note was for. She told him. He did not flinch, which she noticed, because everyone flinched at that number. She thought perhaps he simply had no money. She was half right. It meant nothing to him because he had already paid it, quarter after quarter, for 2 years, and now it had grown into a sum his ranch could no longer quietly cover. "You could talk to Voss," Silas said finally. Edna made a sound that was almost a laugh. Cyrus Voss was the largest landholder in the county, a cattle baron with a fine house, and a finer opinion of himself, and everyone knew he'd been trying to buy up the creek frontage for years. Water was the one thing money couldn't manufacture on the high plains, and a man who controlled the creek controlled every field below it. "Voss doesn't talk," she said. "Voss buys. And what he can't buy, he waits for the bank to hand him." She stood, brushing mud from her skirt. "He'll have my ground by June. He'll dam the creek to feed his herd and let the fields below go dry." She looked at him. "You'll get a rich man for a neighbor instead of a poor woman. Sleep easier for it." "I won't," Silas said. It came out before he could stop it, quiet and flat, and she stared at him. Something passed between them, a current, cold and sudden as creek water. And then he picked up his hammer and turned back to the fence, and she walked back down the path not knowing what she'd seen. But she thought about it that night, lying awake in a house that was no longer certainly hers. "I won't." 2 words. She turned them over the way she'd turned the seed potatoes, looking for the eye, the place where something might grow. Silas Kern did not sleep either. He lay in the dark and thought about the tin box under the loose board, and about a name that was not Rourke. Michael. That had been the name. Michael Rourke, Edna's husband. But before the fever, before Colorado, there had been a war. And in that war there had been a night on a cold hillside in Tennessee when a young private named Michael Rourke had crawled through fire that no sane man would cross, had dragged a wounded sergeant named Silas Kern out of the open and into the trees, had pressed his own hands to the wound to hold the life in and had said, over and over, hold on, you hold on now. Silas had held on. That boy survived the war, went home, married a girl named Edna, and bought a hard piece of Colorado ground. It was a fever that got Michael Rourke in the end, and the man he'd saved didn't hear of it until months later, when he came west himself, looking to disappear. He'd bought his ranch sight unseen, drawn by cheap land and distance, and only after did he learn whose widow farmed the border. Only after did he understand that the creek he shared ran past the grave of the man who'd bought Silas Kern his whole remaining life, with a debt that could never be repaid. So he'd tried to repay it the only way a proud man knows how to pay a debt to a dead friend. Quietly. Through the bank, through Holloway's discretion, quarter after quarter, enough to keep the widow standing without her ever knowing whose hand held her up. It had cost him nearly everything the ranch made, and he had given it gladly, because a man who owes his life must do something with it. And Silas Kern had never been able to think of anything to do with his but pay it back to the one soul who'd valued it. But this spring the note had ballooned, a clause he hadn't understood, a lump sum falling due, a figure past what his lean ranch could cover. And so, for the first time in 2 years, he had not been able to pay, and the bank, no longer quietly kept, had done what banks do. He had, in trying to save her, run out of the means to keep saving her. And she would never even know there'd been a hand to fail. He'd measured his whole worth as one thing, the debt he owed a dead man, and now he'd come up short, and there was nothing left of Silas Kern underneath it, or so he believed. He was, as I've said, very good at telling himself things. The days that followed had a strange, brittle brightness to them. Edna planted as if the sale would never come, because to stop planting was to agree the ground was already gone. She was in the field before light and out of it after dark, and her cracked hands split further, and she wrapped them in rag and kept on. Silas found reasons to be at the fence. He'd never been a man who found reasons for anything. Now he found them daily, a post that needed setting, a strand that needed tightening, always at the hour she'd be out. They spoke across the wire, weather and seed and the price of nails in town. She learned that he never once complained of the ruined hand, and that a man who does not complain of a permanent pain has made some deep, private peace she wanted to understand. One evening neither of them found a thing that needed doing, and they leaned on the wire from opposite sides and watched the light go down the ridge without a word passing at all. It was the easy quiet of two people who'd each spent a long time alone and knew the shape of it in another. When it grew too dark to see, Silas said only, "Best get in," and Edna said, "Aye." And that was the whole of it, and she carried it home warmer than any words she'd been given in 2 years. One afternoon, a late frost threatened, sudden and mean, the kind that could kill a whole field of young shoots in a single clear night. Edna was out with lanterns and burlap, trying to cover what she could, and it was hopeless. 1 woman and 40 rows, and the cold coming down like a lid. She did not hear him come. She only looked up at some point, and found Silas Kern in her field beside her, moving down the rows with an armload of sacking, saying nothing, working. He'd brought smudge pots, the old rancher's trick, little smoldering fires set between the rows to hold the killing cold at bay. They worked till near dawn. When the sun finally broke the ridge and the danger passed, they stood at the edge of the saved field, both of them gray with smoke and swaying on their feet. And Edna looked at the green rose that would have been black without him, and felt something crack open in her chest that she'd kept sealed a long, long time. "Why?" she said. Silas looked at the field instead of at her. "A crop's a crop," he said. "Waste is a sin. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." But it wasn't, and they both knew it wasn't, and Edna let it lie. She poured him coffee from the pot she'd kept warm on the smudge fire, and when he reached for the cup, she saw his scarred hand clearly for the first time, uncurled as far as it would go, and she did not look away, and he noticed that she did not look away. "The war," she said. It wasn't a question. "The war," he agreed. "My husband was in the war." Silas's face did something then, something small and quickly caught, a shadow crossing behind the eyes. "Was he?" Silas said. "Tennessee." He never spoke of it much. Said the men who talked hadn't seen anything, and the men who'd seen anything couldn't talk. She wrapped her cracked hands around the warm cup. He came home changed, quieter, but good. He was always good. She looked at the mound on the hill, the stones she'd carried up one at a time. Foolish, at the end. Rode out in weather he shouldn't have to help a family stranded on the pass. Caught the fever there. Came home shaking and never got warm again. She said it without tears, in the flat voice of a grief long since worn smooth. That was my Michael. He'd give a stranger the coat off his back and the last of the woodpile, and never once count the cost. He always gave more than he had. Silas Kern stood very still. The name hung in the smoke between them. Michael. And it took everything the man had learned about silence not to fall to his knees in that muddy field and tell her all of it. He'd give a stranger the last of the woodpile. Yes. And once, on a hillside on fire, he'd given a stranger the whole rest of his life. And that stranger was standing in her field now, with his hand curled around a tin cup, unable to make it come out even. He sounds like a good man, was all Silas said. He was the best man I ever knew, said Edna. Until lately, I'd have said the only one. And she went back to her rose, and Silas walked home along the creek. And he thought, I would sooner die than tell her, because a debt paid in secret is a gift, and a debt confessed is a chain. And I will not chain that woman to the ghost of what her husband did for me. He was wrong about that too. He had not yet learned that the human heart does not reckon by the plain rules he trusted. If this story is settling into you the way it settled into me, the ache of two proud people carrying more than they'll say, then stay with me to the end. These are the stories I love most to tell, and I only ask one thing. If it's reaching you, let it. Let yourself feel it, that's all. Now come back to Colorado, because Cyrus Voss has ridden out to the widow's farm, and he has come to make her an offer. Voss came in a fine coat on a fine horse, and he sat that horse in Edna's yard, without dismounting, which told her everything about how the conversation would go. He was a broad, ruddy man with a voice built for auction yards, and he looked at her mended shawl and her cracked hands with the frank appraisal of a man reading a price tag. Mrs. Rourke, he said, I'll not waste your time or mine. The bank's going to sell your ground out from under you inside the month. When they do, I'll buy it. At their price, which'll be a robbery, and you'll walk away with nothing but the clothes you stand in. He leaned on the pommel. Or you sell to me now, private, before the flyers go up. A fair price, enough for a train ticket and a fresh beginning, where nobody knows your business. He smiled, and it was not unkind, and that was somehow worse. It's the only sensible thing for a woman in your position. Edna looked up at him a long moment. She thought about her husband's stones on the hill. She thought about a man in her field at 3 a.m, with an armload of burlap and no reason he'd say out loud. What do you want with my water, Mr. Voss? She asked. The smile faltered, just slightly. I want the ground. You want the creek, she said. You've wanted it for years. My frontage and Kern's frontage between you and enough water to run twice the herd you run now. You buy me out, you dam it above the fields, and everything downstream goes to dust. Isn't that the way of it? Voss's face closed like a door, and something colder came up behind it. The patience of a man who has broken smaller people before and enjoyed the doing. He walked the horse a slow step nearer, until its shadow fell across her, and his voice dropped to something quiet and almost gentle, which was worse than any shout. You're a clever woman, he said. I'll tell you what clever gets you out here. Clever gets you a hard winter and no coal. Clever gets your seed corn spoiled some night when nobody saw a soul on your land. Clever gets a fence cut and a well fouled, and a town that already thinks you're trouble, deciding they were right all along. He let that sit. I've outlasted better neighbors than you on less. Take the offer. There won't be a second one. And the next time we speak, I'll own the ditch you're standing in. He turned the fine horse and rode out, and the mud his hooves threw up spattered her skirt, and Edna stood in her yard and shook, not with fear, though there was fear in it now, but with a fury so clean it steadied her better than courage could have. She would not sell to that man. She would lose it first. Losing it and handing it over were different things, and she found she'd rather lose it fighting than surrender it sensible. Michael never gave to get. He gave because a thing was worth the giving. Maybe, she thought, that's the only worth having. She went to Holloway again the next morning. She stood at the counter, and she did not raise her voice, and she did not leave. And a woman who will not raise her voice and will not leave is harder to be rid of than a woman who shouts. Who, she said. For 2 years, someone kept my note paid. I have a right to know whose charity I've been living on. Tell me who, Mr. Holloway, or so help me, I'll sit on this floor until the sale, and let the whole town wonder what you're hiding. Holloway went the color of tallow, and weak men, pressed between two fears, will always fall toward the nearer one. And Edna Rourke, planted at his counter with her cracked hands flat on the wood, was very much the nearer one. Kern, he whispered. It was Kern, Silas Kern. Every quarter, for 2 years, out of his own pocket, on the condition I never say his name. And this spring the sum came too high for him to cover. God forgive me, I've broken my word telling you. He mopped his face. Why he did it, I couldn't say. He only ever said, he said it was owed, that he owed it. Those were his words. It's owed. Edna walked out of the bank into the spring sunlight and did not remember the walk home. Kern, the man at the fence, the man in her field at 3 in the morning, the man who did not flinch at the terrible number because the number was already his. It's owed, he'd said. Owed for what? She could not for the life of her understand what a stranger could owe a widow he'd never known. And then, standing at her own gatepost, she remembered his face when she'd said the name Michael, and the way he'd said was he, so carefully, like a man stepping around a hole in the dark. Tennessee, she thought. The war. He was in the war. She did not go to him that day, or the next. She was afraid, not of him, but of the size of the thing she'd stumbled into. A man who'd paid her way in secret for 2 years and let her think she'd done it herself, so she'd keep her pride. A man who was, right now, losing his own footing on this hard earth because he'd spent it keeping her upright. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever done for her, and it made her angrier than she'd ever been in her life. She went to him at dusk on the 3rd day. He was on the porch with the dented tin cup, and he saw her coming up the creek path, and he knew. She watched him know that she knew. He set the cup down and stood and waited for it, and there was no fear in his face, only a kind of exhausted relief. The relief of a man who has carried a stone so long that even the dropping of it feels like grace.
You paid my note, she said. 2 years. In secret. Holloway told me.
He shouldn't have. He shouldn't have had to. Her voice shook. You let me stand in that field thinking I'd saved my own ground with my own 2 hands, and the whole time it was your money holding the roof over my head. And you never said a word. You let me have my pride while you spent yourself down to nothing keeping me. She stopped. She pressed the back of her wrist to her mouth. Why? And don't you dare tell me a crop's a crop. Why, Silas? And Silas Kern, who had told himself for 2 years that he would sooner die than tell her, found that the dying and the telling were the same thing, and that he was ready for both. Your husband, he said. Michael. Tennessee. The winter of '63. There was a hill. His curled hand pressed flat against his own chest, over the place. I was a sergeant, with a wound in my belly, lying in the open, and every man who'd tried to reach me was already gone in the grass. And a private came through the fire for me, crawled, put his own hands to the wound to hold the life in, and dragged me back into the trees, saying, hold on, you hold on now, over and over, till the words didn't mean anything, but I held on anyway because he told me to. Silas's voice was very low. That private was Michael Rourke, your Michael. He gave me the last of his own woodpile, Edna. He gave me every year I've had since, and I never got to pay him back, because by the time I came west to find him, he was already under those stones on your hill. Edna stood absolutely still. The creek talked. The light went from gold to gray, so I paid the only one left to pay. Silas said. "I couldn't give it back to him. I gave it to you. Quiet, so it'd be a gift and not a debt. So you'd keep the one thing a body's got that can't be seized, which is the belief you stood on your own feet. A life for a life." It was owed, his voice finally cracked. "And I couldn't even do that right. I ran short. He saved my whole life, and I couldn't save one farm with it. That's what I'm worth. Edna, when you take it all the way down, nothing that wasn't already his." For a long moment, she couldn't speak at all. And then she came up the porch steps, slow, and stood in front of him, closer than they'd ever stood, and looked at his curled and ruined hand. "You've got it wrong," she said. Her voice was thick, but it did not waver. "You think a life is a debt to be paid down till it's gone. And when the money ran out, you decided there was nothing left of you worth keeping." She took his scarred hand in both of hers, uncurled it as far as it would go, pressed her cracked palms to his, and he went rigid, because no one had touched that hand in years, no one but a surgeon. Michael didn't crawl through that fire to buy back what you owed him someday. He crawled through it because you were a man worth crawling for. There was no ledger, and you've spent 2 years trying to close an account he never opened. "Edna, I don't want to be your penance, Silas." It came out fierce, and it stopped him cold. "I won't be the thing you die paying off to a ghost. I've been overlooked my whole life. Too much of one thing, not enough of another. And I have made my peace with being no one's treasure. But I will not be your bookkeeping. If that's all I am to you, a debt you owe a dead man, then take your hand back and let the bank sell my ground, and let's be strangers who share a creek." The silence stretched. The first star came out over the ridge. "But if," she said, quieter now, and this was the hardest thing she had ever said in her life, harder than burying Michael, harder than facing Voss. "If somewhere along the way, at some fence, in some field at 3 in the morning, I stopped being a debt and started being a woman. Just a woman you didn't want to see go under. Then say so. Say it plain, because I have measured my own worth down to the last coin more times than I can bear. And I am so tired, Silas. I am so tired of coming up short in everyone's eyes but my own." Silas Kern looked at this woman holding his broken hand as if it were something precious, and he understood, far too late and just barely in time, that he had had it wrong. He had thought his whole worth was a debt. She was telling him, a life is not a debt at all. A life is a gift, passed hand to hand, and the only sin in it is refusing to be given anything. "You stopped being a debt," he said, "the first morning you drank my water and didn't thank me for it." His curled fingers closed, slowly, painfully, around her cracked ones. The most he'd been able to close that hand in years, and it cost him, and he did it anyway. "I only know I've been finding reasons to stand at that fence for weeks, and none of them were Michael. They were you. A man who thinks he's only what he owes doesn't reckon he's got the right to want anything." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "But I want, Edna. God help me. I told myself it was owed. It isn't owed. It's just you. It's just wanting you." She made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob, and she pressed her forehead to his chest, right over the old wound, and he brought his ruined arm around her and held on. Held on. "You hold on now." And the creek ran past the both of them talking its old talk in the dark, past his ground and past her ground, and past the stones on the hill, one water, undivided, belonging to no one and to both. They still had a farm to save. Wanting doesn't stop a bank, and neither of them was fool enough to pretend it did. They sat on the porch step a long while after, letting the thing they'd said settle into the cool of the evening. It was Edna who broke the quiet, and she broke it the way she did everything, plainly, with her mind already 3 furrows ahead of her heart. "The water," she said. She lifted her head. "Voss wants it, because whoever holds both frontages holds all of it. My claim and yours, separate, are worth little, but joined." The fierce farmer's mind that had kept 40 rows alive alone was turning fast now. 2 water claims filed as one holding are worth more than either alone. Silas, a ranch with the whole creek frontage secured. The bank would lend against that in a heartbeat. It's why he's circling. He's been trying to take us one at a time, because together, We're the one thing he can't afford to let anyone else make." Silas was quiet, turning it. "Marry the claims," he said at last, slowly. "Marry the claims," she agreed, and then color came into her cheeks, and she made herself say the rest of it. "And whatever else follows, I'll not have you thinking it's only ledgers between us again. But the land part is sound, Silas. Your ranch and my farm, filed as one water right, one holding. Put that in front of Halloway, and he'll lend against the frontage, and clear the note in an afternoon, and Voss can damn nothing, because he'll never own both banks." Her mouth curved, tired and fierce at once. "He was so busy pricing us apart, he never reckoned what we'd be together." They rode into town together the next morning, and it was a strange sight for the valley. The war-scarred rancher who spoke to no one, and the widow the town watched like a candle near a curtain, side by side on the muddy road. Halloway, when he understood what they were proposing, went pale, and then, slowly, relieved, like a weak man handed away to do the decent thing without any risk to himself. The frontage secured a loan easily. The note was cleared by noon, the seizure sale struck from the book, and when Cyrus Voss came thundering in that afternoon to make his robbery, he found there was nothing left to rob. 2 small holdings had become one strong one overnight, and the water he'd hungered for would run past his reach forever. He found them on the bank steps and reined in hard, the ruddy face white with something close to hatred. "You think you've won," he said, low. "A dying ranch and a dirt farm. You'll have a hard road yet, the both of you." But there was no weight behind the threat anymore, and they all three knew it. A damned creek is worth a war, but a creek he could never dam was worth nothing to him. "You never could tell the difference between a price and a person, Mr. Voss," Edna said. "That's why you'll always be counting, and always be poor in the ways that matter." And Voss looked at the two of them standing shoulder to shoulder, and turned his fine horse, and rode out of their story for good. They were married in the spring, by the same preacher who'd never called on the widow, in a church that had found her wanting and now, in the way of towns, decided it had always known she was worth something. Edna wore her mended shawl. She would not buy a new one to please people who'd shunned her in the old. Silas stood beside her with his scarred hand bare, no longer hidden, and when the moment came, he took her cracked palm in his curled one and held on. They planted the fields together that year, both farms as one, and in September, the harvest came in heavy enough to fill the wagon twice. Silas learned to leave the tin box under the loose board empty. There was nothing left to keep in the dark. Edna learned that a woman could be someone's treasure and still stand on her own 2 feet, and that 2 people the world had written off as nothing could put themselves together and make a thing no one could seize. And on quiet evenings, when the work was done, they'd sit on the porch and look up the hill at the stones, and they did not grieve so much as remember, out loud, the good foolish man who'd given more than he had, the man who'd crawled through fire not to buy anything, but simply because a life was worth crawling for. Silas would rub his ruined hand, the one Edna warmed in hers every night without being asked, and thought that Michael had understood something he was only now learning, because that was the truth of it, the truth Silas had spent 2 years and nearly everything he had learning. We are none of us the price others put on us, and none of us a debt to be paid down until we vanish. We are gifts, passed hand to scarred hand across the cold, and the ones who love us are not settling any account. They simply looked and found us worth the crossing. These stories are made with love, and if this one stayed with you, if it warmed some cold place the way that creek ran warm through 2 saved fields, then subscribe and stay a while by the fire with me. That is all I ask.